Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 8 of Unrestricted Live. I'm so excited for today and today's guest, but really quickly, a few things. First of all, my name is Athena Simpson. I'm an events marketing and business strategist, and I am also a productivity coach. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Unrestricted and why I started this movement. I bought into that whole idea around success. I was plugged into the matrix and I was chasing this untenable dream of, reaching the next goal, the next goal, the next goal, and never really feeling very satisfied with my life. So I decided to, opt out of the societal ideas of success and go on a journey to discover and redefine what success looks like for me. And through that journey, I've been blessed to meet so many amazing people that are living lives differently, that I was able to pull inspiration and strength and insight from. And I decided that it was very selfish of me to keep these people to myself. So that's what Unrestricted is all about. It's introducing you to these incredible trailblazing women that are living life differently, that have incredible practices and incredible mindsets and insights about living life differently. So today's guest is no exception, and I'm really excited to introduce you to her. So please help me welcome Miss Holly Angela Clark. Hello.
Hello, thank you. Thank you. What a beautiful introduction.
How are you?
I'm phenomenal. I'm amazing. I always say this, but I really do feel like most of my life now, every day I wake up, I feel incredible.
That's awesome. That's what we like to hear. So this is episode 8. This has actually been running for 2 months. We've had 7 guests before you, and we were just talking before we set off that you are the first guest that's actually been on a podcast before. So you have broken my spell of taking the virginity of people. So welcome. And that's okay.
Talking about doing things differently, I always like to be the round peg in the square hole.
The rebel. Yes, yes. So kick us off by telling us a bit about, your career background. Like, tell us a bit about what you've done up till now.
Yeah, you asked me about this the other day, and I thought about where on earth to start because in so many ways I've been a jack of all trades in my life. I was that child who came in here, and I really got this feeling of like, I don't know who I am. This world is really strange. And I was searching for something throughout my whole life. For the first probably 20, 24 years of my life, I remember thinking, I'm searching for something, but I don't know what it is. So I put myself through, I think, about 46 different jobs before I was 28 years old. And people often ask, like, how did you fit that in? But sometimes I had 3 jobs at once, and I would just move through things. So when someone asks about my career background, I'm like, you know what? It's ridiculous. But it was a mixture of hospitality and I was a tutor for anatomy and physiology for 6 years of my life at a university. At some point in my most forgetfulness, like when I was most not being myself, I was a PA to a financial planner. I don't know how that happened in there. I was sales coach for a personal training firm. I became a personal trainer. I worked in a gym as a kickboxer, cleaning the toilets and helping children with kickboxing. I opened a dance school. It's just like this huge plethora of really seemingly unrelated events that has been my career background. And it led me to a point where I thought that I probably should get my life together because society was saying you should do something with your life. I was intelligent enough through school that I had a lot of people in my family behind me saying you should do something with your life. So in my early 20s, I decided that maybe I should make something of myself, and I went to university to study to be a doctor. So I spent 2.5 years studying biomedical science. But I just studied my way out of it because I learned too much about the system, about the pharmaceutical industry, about conspiracy theories. So I was studying to be a doctor and studying my way out of it, and I couldn't keep going. And I did go back, and when I was 26, I did put myself through school again, and I studied a Bachelor of Health Science and and acupuncture, Chinese medicine, going down of more Eastern philosophy pathway, because I'd become very interested in the nature of the body and energy and spirituality and awakening in alternative healing modalities. But even that didn't fully fulfill my insatiable desire to understand the spirit and the human psychology and our spiritual evolution. So that just became another tool in my tool belt. And then I've spent quite a lot of time looking at, in my own experience, more like primal therapies and trauma and emotional liberation work and meditation, and working with the world of psychedelics and plant medicine has been a part of that. But I became just absolutely fascinated with the process of spiritual awakening, and everything else I've done in my life and all these little bits and pieces have just become tools and permission slips to really deepen in my, my discovery of myself, which is what everything is. So it's a kaleidoscope of events. I don't have some sort of straightforward linear answer to my career path. I love
that,
Yeah.
It's so indicative of those of us that feel a little bit different. And a lot of people don't have, the strength to keep going and keep trying things. They just kind of they find something and stay in it because, that pressure of family or friends telling you should be doing something, or society telling you should be doing something. You stay there, and then you get to the point where you either realize like, oh my God, what have I been doing? Or just feeling really unfulfilled. So it takes a lot of strength and bravery, I think, to keep trying new things. So where are you living right now? What have you been up to? Where have you been the last year or so? It's been pretty incredible.
Yeah, my last year hasn't been any different than the rest of my life, really, in terms of chaos and moving around. So I landed in Portland 3 days ago. So I'm in Oregon in the United States right now. But in the last 12 months, I think that I traveled through 11 countries, and I've had about as many plane flights as I have jobs. I think we're up around the 40 mark, or 38 last time I checked in the last 12 months. So I was in India. I took a tour through India last year, and at this time I was in Mexico working with some of the more natural medicines out there and traveling through a number of the different states. I traveled through the United States after that. Then I was in Peru, I was in Bolivia, did Guatemala, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, back to Mexico, and then through a bunch of states in the US again. So maybe 9 countries or something.
Wow, cool. So you are birthing something pretty amazing right now. Tell us about the project that you're working on and what the next kind of 3 to 6 months looks like for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I got on the road a year ago because it was the same feeling. When you start to follow a spiritual path, you come to a point where following your heart becomes the most rewarding, the most exciting thing you could do. So the travel around the world was just me following my heart and having no other path open up except the one that I was taking. And as I said, like, I've always been fascinated in the spiritual development or the spiritual awakening of a human being, of our planet. And in a way, I've looked at things and I'm continuously thinking, that doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And so I was searching for a way to help people and to help myself awaken in the most powerful and integrative way possible. So going through India, going through Mexico, working with psychedelics, spending time in America working with the arts community, really, I started to pick up all these key bits of information to put together a process to help people basically liberate themselves. So through all of this journey, I met a group of amazing human beings who were all healers and artists in their own right. And we were all talking about how do we liberate ourselves and how do we help the planet change? And we built Earth Pulse. So Earth Pulse is a company, or it's a project that we have built out to take people through a series of steps in order to realize that they're free, in order to access deeper levels of their creative expression, and also to realize that they have an amazing innate healing ability within inside of themselves. So it's a really fun way of saying that I help people enlighten themselves.
Amazing. So I really like getting like kind of basic definitions for things, because I think sometimes, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience because we've talked about this and I've been very resistant to a lot of these new practices and spiritual awakenings and that sort of thing. So, can you just give us like, a 6-year-old explanation of spirituality and maybe like spiritual awakening? Like what, and who is this for?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people, I'm just going to do what spiritual awakening isn't first, because a lot of people think that spiritual awakening is becoming aware of concepts that feel right. So some people read a book and they say, we're all one, or we're all connected, because they read it in a book. That's not an awakening. That's just reading a book and feeling like some information makes some sense. I believe a spiritual awakening is waking up to the realization of who you are, which means realizing that this material body, this self that you think you are, is only a part of a bigger picture, a bigger experience you can have. I'm going to try and do this in the 6-year-old way, but it's becoming aware of who and what you really are at a much grander level than just the body and the mind.
So it's kind of connecting beyond just like, the physical and the thoughts that you might have, and kind of realizing you're bigger than yourself. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you really think about it, a lot of people believe that they are the body that they're walking around in, and that they are the thoughts they have in their head. And they spend all their time, 100% of their day, believing that they are their body and their thoughts. And because that's all that we live in, we believe that's everything. And then the objects that we see outside of ourselves. But a spiritual awakening is actually having experiences where you realize that that's only a small part of yourself. It's only a part. It's the material part of yourself. But there is an energetic nature to everything that is creating the material reality, including your body and the thoughts and everything you see. And you can actually experience the energy that is creating the material reality. And awakening, to me, is actually becoming more aware of the fact that you're a lot more than just the material reality and the thoughts that you think.
Cool. So, like, do you have maybe an example of when this started happening for you, or when you started getting this realization? And also, I guess the second part of that question is like, at what point, was there a catalyst that made you decide to start helping others with this process?
Yeah. I think that desire to find something, I said my whole life I was searching for something, but I didn't know what it was. I would say that was my spirit always on the path, although I didn't know what that was. I think, that feeling that so many of us have of, I want to be something. I want to find love. I want to feel happy. I want to do something that's fulfilling. I want to make a difference. I want to, be safe. This desire to find those things, I believe, is our spirit pulling us. So I would say that I've been on the journey my entire life. Consciously, I didn't realize that until I was about 24. I grew up in a religious family, and I didn't like the rules. I've been a rule breaker my whole life. So I turned my back on God and on spirituality my entire life. Well, at least until I was 24, and realized that didn't work. And so the awakening, like most people, was just that my life wasn't working. I couldn't make my relationships work. I didn't understand my health. I couldn't find satisfaction in studying to be a doctor. Nothing made sense in the material world. And that destruction of my identity, and the destruction of my health, and the feeling like I should have been getting better and understanding life, but instead it was like I'm getting more confused. My ability to communicate with people is getting worse. And I was getting migraines every 2 weeks studying, because I had, we've talked about this before, insane perfectionism traits that I adopted from. And none of it was working. I couldn't think my way into a better life, and I couldn't intellectualize my way into deeper connections. And that's all I had. I had my thoughts, and it wasn't working. So when I was 24 and I looked at my life, and I realized that I was a mess, that I was riddled with anxiety. I couldn't sleep properly. I'd wake up feeling sick with anxiety, and I couldn't, connect. That was the thing. I was really struggling to connect with people. And I had a breakdown. I had an absolute breakdown when I was, 24 years old. And I had an eat, pray, love moment where I handed my life back over to God. And I said, look, I don't actually know, God, if you exist. if you do, you're a bit of an asshole because this world is very screwed up, but I don't know where else to turn. So let me hand my life over to you and try it another way. And my life flipped very, very quickly from there. And I went from being almost not interested in spirituality or the process of enlightenment at all to being, that's my whole life.
Mm-hmm. So for context, do you mind telling us how old you are now? Because you look quite young.
Yeah. I'm 32. So it was about 8 years ago that happened.
8 years ago. Amazing.
Yeah.
So we have a couple topics we're going to talk about today, and we talked through the kind of process, so we can kind of like layer in all these amazing things that you offer and all of these amazing practices and passions that you have. So it all kind of starts with processing trauma and how you help people process trauma. So tell us a little bit about that, and also, how primal therapies, or what primal therapies even are, and how they feed into that.
Yeah, I mean, when you start your spiritual journey, you don't think that you're going to, end up in a whirlwind of trying to understand and process trauma. But I have come to realize that usually is where it starts. Trauma, in a very basic way, is described as a deeply disturbing or distressing event that happens to you that you aren't fully able to process in the moment that it happens. Another way of putting that is that in the moment that you experience this event, your body doesn't finish or completely express the emotion that is felt. So it's like the movement is incomplete. So when we're children, and whether you believe in reincarnation or not, they've done a lot of studies on this, maybe past life as well, but we'll just stick with children. When you're younger and you experience trauma, that for some reason in the moment, you're not completely able to express what that did to you. You aren't able to process the adrenaline that's in the body, that is dumped in the body when you meet these types of experiences. We store it as a memory in our subconscious mind as a protection mechanism, so that if anything triggers that first traumatic response, or that if anything triggers that initial traumatic memory, the body can go into a defense mechanism and protect itself from the idea of more pain coming. So if you're on a spiritual journey, part of the spiritual journey is to step into the unknown, to meet yourself again and again and again. But the unknown is usually where our greatest fear lies, because in the unknown, there's a potential for fear. So as you're walking on the spiritual journey, usually a lot of the blockers are the traumas that are still lodged in your body from the past. So if you want to continue advancing, your body is literally going to give you an opportunity to process all of your past trauma. And now some people would call this being triggered. So every time you're triggered, you actually having an experience of your past trauma arising in your body, giving you an opportunity to deal with it now so that you can continue on your spiritual path. So trauma became, in my opinion, one of the first things that I look at when I start helping people on their pathway to liberation. Of course, I had to go through that. When I was 28 or something, I realized how much trauma was in my body. And I actually spent a long time understanding and going through processes of healing trauma. That's really like the scientific definition. We can actually look at trauma from the perspective of science, where we've got people in the Western world looking at PTSD and understanding trauma from a medical point of view. People like Dr. Peter Levine are working on trauma, and they've dedicated their life to understanding how to put people through trauma release responses, and they're recognizing it changes their life. From a spiritual point of view, some people call it healing your inner child. It's the same thing. Use these different terminologies, but healing your inner child is the same thing as processing past trauma. It's just that in a moment when an experience comes up, if you're triggered, now we have an opportunity to process past trauma. Very simply, if you want to know how to process past trauma, it is giving yourself an opportunity in the moment that it arises to complete the movement, to fully feel it, to completely express it. So somatic therapy is giving somebody permission and a safe environment to actually fully complete the trauma or the emotion that they felt in the experience that they had when they were a child, which is the body's journey. The body needs to process that. So somatics means wisdom of the body. Somatic therapy means that you give adults permission to throw the childhood tantrum that they didn't get to in the moment that they experienced that trauma. So there's many ways that you can do it. One of the first things I do is I give people permission to throw tantrums. So there's many ways to process trauma. So I want to preface it that way first. And there's many ways that I do it, and I do it differently depending on where someone's consciousness is at. But usually when people start, taking them back to a traumatic experience that they haven't dealt with gives them the opportunity to feel in their body the emotion that they haven't felt. And what we find is when a trigger comes up, you're actually judging that emotion is not okay to be felt. That's why it's triggering. If you didn't judge what you felt, it would never be a trigger. So there's a judgment in that what I'm feeling right now is not okay to be felt. But if we have a safe environment, my job is to guide people through realizing that it is okay to feel what you're feeling. And not only is it okay to feel it, it's okay to express it. And then we let the body express itself how it needed to, which can look like shouting or kicking or crying or screaming or laughing or feeling pleasure. There's all sorts of different expressions of our repressed trauma and our repressed emotions. But that's the somatic part of healing trauma.
Yeah, I remember, so Holly and I spent a couple months together in Guatemala, and there was a meditation facility, like training facility right next to our kind of residency. So we had to like find a place for Holly's workshop because, man, like people were letting go. And I just remember like everybody feeling like so liberated in that experience. We're hearing a lot more about, primal therapies and how actually, again, in society, it's just conditioning us to numb all of our responses, right? And we're given all of these substances to be able to do that too. Like alcohol is a huge one. Like it numbs all your emotions. And for those of you that don't know, I gave it up like a year and a half ago. And just the amount of emotions that start coming out when you stop numbing yourself is pretty intense. So we have all these, available things to numb all the responses, Mm-hmm. It's just layers and layers of trauma packed on top of each other.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Do you mind if I just jump in and say like two things there? Because you brought it up so nicely. Alcohol and all of the other numbing vices that we have, which go far surpass just alcohol. Anything can be numbing, from Facebook to listening to music in certain ways. And going to the gym can be an avoidance technique that numbs your emotions. There's so many ways that we numb our emotions. But I like to just preface that with it's totally understandable why people do that. It's totally, it makes sense that people want to get out of their pain and they don't know how else to do it. And we have all of these things in society that we've said it's okay to use, or, we've figured out that if we do numb, we do feel a little bit of relief for a minute in time. So I completely understand why people get addicted to certain numbing vices, because they're looking for a way out of their pain, which makes sense. The only thing is it doesn't last. It's not permanent. When you stop drinking, it comes back. When you stop going to the gym, look at all the people who can't move through the corona. Now all of a sudden their trauma or their ability to sit with themselves is much harder. It's all coming back up. And it's because we have created a society that says you're not allowed to feel half of the human experience. And you're not allowed to feel or express these things. Don't feel it at work. You shouldn't show your children this thing. Don't be an unhappy person. Anger is bad. Jealousy is bad. We have made half of the human experience so bad, and we're so psychologically terrified of expressing and feeling those things for fear of what the repercussion of the society will be, or people's thoughts will be, that it's actually safer and easier for us to numb out. And that was... that's how we set up this society. And I can see that from two ways as well. We can go down the path of, well, that's because the people in power didn't want people to be liberated and wholly full and complete themselves, which is one way of seeing it. The other side, and the other way I like to look at it, is what a perfect setup for people to liberate themselves once they got fed up with being suppressed.
Yeah. And it's getting even more polarized, I think, with this convenience culture. Like we're now conditioned to be able to grab things at the push of a button on our phones, and to be comfortable in every single scenario, as comfortable as possible. So we've just conditioned ourselves to what we think is comfortable. And in the same time, I guess in my own journey, I've realized that by numbing the bad feelings, it was also numbing the good. I was numbing my ability to come into my own, and realize my potential, and feel okay with, and I still wrestle with this, the imposter syndrome, and like coming into my own, and like really believing that I'm capable of doing some things. So, society gives us this dream and then conditions us to believe that we don't deserve it, you know? At least that was my experience, and I think a lot of people share that as well. But one of the tools that you use, and my experience with you on guided meditation was one of the most, like, meditation for me, I've been really resistant to it, like really resistant for a very long time. My brain goes a million miles a minute, and over the last couple of years, I've realized like I have a real issue with control and wanting to feel in control. And one of the things that meditation does is it kind of takes away the control from you, especially when you kind of like hand over your mind to somebody else to guide you through that process. So I've been slowly but surely like getting more comfortable with meditation. And you did a guided meditation in Guatemala, which had me seeing this vision of myself riding a jaguar in a neon green cat suit through the jungle with this like rose pink light shining out of me. And I saw it so clearly. And it was like, oh my God, this is my next phase. Like, this is me, like the spirit of Athena riding the jaguar. And I shared that with you. And actually this necklace that I'm wearing, you guys, like Holly gave that to me as a result of this meditation and this weird like universe connection with this beautiful necklace that I now wear every day. So it was a little bit of a tangent there, but meditation can be super powerful and super transformative, and it's one of the things that you are really passionate about. So tell us about what got you into it, and why you love it so much.
Oh man, I find my journey with meditation hilarious because I hated it when I was younger. I went to a school, I'm incredibly relatable like that. Talking about imposter syndrome, I felt like an imposter my entire life, especially when you stand up and say, I want to help people liberate themselves and talk about enlightenment. The imposter syndrome goes, who do you think you are? So I understand that too. But meditation, I went to a school in the year 10, 11, 12 that based a lot of its philosophy on yoga and meditation and breathing. And I hated it. I thought it was the stupidest thing in the world. The rebel in me was like, do not tell me to sit and breathe and meditate. I didn't sit in my first meditation. I didn't even know what the hell it was properly until I went to India and I did my first Vipassana. That's how I threw myself into meditation. Even after doing that, I wasn't too stoked on the whole thing, to be honest. I just spent the whole time making up movies in my mind. So I realized I really love my imagination through that process.
Tell us really quickly before you go on, for those that might not know what a Vipassana is.
Vipassana is a, I don't know all of the details of it, but it came from the Buddha. So the Buddha sat under the Bodhisattva tree. He sat there for a period of time, and they say he enlightened himself. He realized the nature of himself, and then he taught this process of sitting. And I think Vipassana really represents what people think about when they think about meditation, of like the yogi sitting cross-legged with their hands like this, and this idea of meditation. So of course that was my idea of meditation. So I threw myself into the Vipassana, and it's a process of 10 days of silence. So you don't speak, you don't talk to anyone, you don't even look at anybody in the eyes, and you sit for up to 14 hours a day in that lotus position, trying to concentrate your full attention on the breath coming out of the nose for the first couple of days, and then just scanning and feeling energy in your body. So I didn't really get what on earth was happening at that time. I tried to understand, but I like to throw myself in the deep end. So that was my
It kind of sounds like my worst nightmare, what you just described.
I can look, it's a lot of people's worst nightmare, and that's probably why they put themselves in it. And I understand that a lot of people get a lot out of it because it's the first time they're forced to be with themselves and to have a look at what's going on in their inner world all the time. And it can be very challenging. It's physically challenging, it's mentally challenging, and you don't have any numbing substances. There's nothing there. So you actually have to give up those things and have a moment with yourself. And most people are so deeply hateful of themselves, and they don't want to admit it, but the psyche of most human beings is so cruel towards themselves. They think that they're so unworthy and so incapable and so broken and so stupid. I mean, the psyche of the human being it's very cruel at first, and you have to sit with that. So it can be a very, very uncomfortable process to have a look at the way you treat yourself in those processes. But moving on from that was my introduction to meditation. The next thing I did was 1.5 years of chanting Hare Krishna. I decided to then throw myself into being a Hare Krishna, and then I chanted for 1.5 years. And even through that 1.5 years, I didn't understand what the point of meditation really was. I would feel a little bit relaxed sometimes, but I could feel that it was building discipline for something. And that's probably why I stuck at it, because I felt that discipline was necessary. I didn't know why. As I have continued on the journey, especially working with psychedelics, and I'm going to pop this in here because the first time that I sat with psychedelics and I realized I was so much bigger than what I thought I was, and there was a whole realm of consciousness beyond just the material dimension of consciousness, and meditation became the access point to experiencing higher dimensional states of your being. So you can have access to grander perspectives of yourself, and if you go deeper and deeper into it, you can actually come to a point where you access your soul, or infinite consciousness, or the space of what we would call non-dual reality or enlightenment as an actual experience. And when I started to touch those things, meditation becomes one of the most exciting, most delicious experiences of your life. Well, meditation doesn't actually. Meditation is just the tool to have the experience. And then eventually, meditation can just be the state that you live in. And the last thing I want to say before we go into any more depth about meditation is I realized through doing all these different things, from Vipassana to mantra meditations to working with psychedelics to traditional meditation, that there are so many ways to do meditation and to access those states of being. It's not just sitting in the lotus pose. The somatic work, or the Osho, I work with Osho's processes sometimes, like the somatic jumping, the cathartic work is sometimes insanely meditative. There is different dance states that you get into that are meditative. Contact dance, any type of flow state. There are as many ways to get into the meditative flow state as there are people on the planet. So when I realized that, meditation became way more exciting and way more creative for me than what I had originally thought it was. So big shift from being in high school hating it to where I'm at right now, where it's become one of my most favorite states of being and tools to use to help people.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm definitely like getting on the bandwagon. The more, because it was exactly as you said. I thought it was sitting in one place for a really long period of time, and like, I'm a little bit ADD still, so like doing that is quite difficult. So, and also when I didn't know what I was doing, so I think I was like second guessing myself and judging myself because I didn't know what was going on or what I should be doing. So, when you start exploring, there's so many different ways that it can be done, and one of the things that really like started to kick it into gear for me was realizing like I could do a yoga practice, and then after the yoga practice, because I'd moved my body, like I kind of just felt like chill, and I could just like sit down and just like listen to the sounds around me. And it was when I started tuning into things that I started feeling like, okay, maybe this is something I could do, because having a focus of like the sounds rather than sitting there and being like, don't think. So I love it. And you do guided meditation, which is different as well. You take people on a journey, and actually we're going to get a little taste of this later, which I'm super excited about. But tell us a little bit about what benefits doing meditation has.
I would say that every single benefit you could come up with in the universe, meditation can probably help with it. We could look at that from infinite ways, and we could probably write a textbook on the benefits of meditation. But just from a physiological point of view, when you begin to enter, I'm going to use it as this. I believe meditation can help you access heaven. I believe heaven is a state of being that is on earth. It's here, it's everywhere, and we have access to it. I would say that heaven is a state of being where you realize that you're safe, you're whole, you're connected, you're creative, there's no limitations, you're not any of the ideas of scarcity or the ideas you have about being less than or unworthy. So if you can actually use meditation or find a practice that allows you to access the state of heaven, and heaven's not boring, by the way. I know these are all definitions, but heaven to me is this state of being that I'm describing, and I'll take you on a process to feel it later. What happens when you begin to access that dimension of your being that everybody has access to? Your body starts to relax, and it starts to move back into balance with everything. So it can help you from a physiological level to rebalancing your digestive system, to calming the mind, to slowing your heart rate down, to all sorts of physiological balance. Like your body will rebalance itself naturally if you allow yourself to get into that state of such deep relaxation. The other thing is, that's the physiological element. The more relaxed you are, I heard someone say this recently, and I love it so deeply. The more relaxed you are, the more you say, this moment is okay, and I'm going to relax into it no matter what, the more the doorway of enlightenment opens to you. It just keeps opening and opening and opening. And so you can have deeper and deeper experiences and realizations about who and what you are at profound levels. The spiritual experiences, that you can have when you relax into this flow state of what I could call heaven is profound beyond measure. It's beautiful. When you can feel things like the connection of your heart to the universe, when you feel like the vibration of nature is inside of you and that you are that, it can bring tears to your eyes. These feelings of gratitude or wholeness or of being completely seen and completely loved are so beautiful that when you're in them, you're whole and complete. It's everything we're searching for. And that's what meditation can give us access to. I know I'm forgetting what question you asked because I got so taken away by it.
It was the benefits, but I think
the benefits. Okay, so the other benefit that I want to say there is not only physiologically does it give you benefits, but you access yourself. And within inside of yourself is answers to every question you had. Who am I? Why am I here? What's my joy? You gain access to universal wisdom. You gain access to your creative abilities, your innate healing abilities. So not only does your body heal, your expression of yourself completely transforms, and it becomes a way more joyful and more authentic expression of who and what you really are inside of your heart and soul. So I don't know what more benefits people could be looking for than accessing themselves, being all of themselves, feeling whole and complete, healing their body, sharing their gifts with the world, living in a state of love rather than fear. But so that's just a touch of the potential benefits.
And that's like the potential and big picture. And I just want to throw it out there because like these ideas of like enlightenment or, I was very resistant to them because I didn't think they were accessible to me. So I just want to like put it out there that, Holly is so inspirational in kind of painting this picture of what could be, but like, don't let that put you off on the idea that like you can get, even answers to like, I'm having an issue at work, and meditation can help you like try to find an answer or find some peace around that. So like these everyday problems that sometimes we let be the barrier to us doing some of these practices. Actually, we can solve those problems and then get to a point where it's like when we start learning how these tools can help us like mitigate the panic or anxiety or stress that these smaller issues in life that feel really big, you know, like when we start incorporating these tools into our life, they don't seem as big a deal. So I just wanted to throw that out there as someone that's like new into this idea of like meditation and how these practices can actually like help you in your everyday life. For me, meditation, you know, I do it every morning. I had to force myself to do it every morning. 10 minutes felt like an absolute freaking eternity. And I would sit there and I'd be like, do not move after 10 minutes. And it got to the point where once I got through the uncomfortable position of it, I realized like it's setting the tone for my day. And I'm just like much more chilled and much more excited about my day. I feel like I can, you know, the little things, or they feel little now, that used to be really big things, the things that would throw me for a massive loop and get me really upset. You know, there's still things that do that, like the Wi-Fi cutting out on the first day of my challenge, but you know, I'm learning how to like deal with that stuff, and meditation helps.
Yeah. You know, one of the reasons I like to come in and talk about these huge concepts, even if I'm talking to people who are just beginning their spiritual journey, is that we have made them so inaccessible to the normal person. I am a normal person. I was a normal person who just wanted to be free. Every person I meet, I resonate with them in some way, shape, or form. I'm not special. I'm not different. I just wanted to be free. And I managed to live that relentlessly. But what I've found is that these states that I'm talking about of enlightenment is for everybody. It's actually so beautifully simple in some ways. It's complex to access it because of our psyche, but it's not held back for just a few people. That's not how the game works. Everybody has access to peace. Everybody has access to wholeness and completion. And we talk about these big spiritual concepts. I love to like bring them down and say everybody has access to being whatever, you know, in whatever state they choose to be, with a little bit of help sometimes, but then not separating those states of being from the everyday struggles, because they're not actually separate. If we can access the states of peace, then the embodiment process is how deeply can we feel that within our hearts, so that we can navigate our work life, so that we can navigate our relationship with our partner, so that we can parent well, because the relationships that we have with the people in this world is really where all of our spiritual training lies. We can access these states in meditation so that we can go, I remember who I am. I know how to access that within inside of myself, so that I don't need anybody or anything outside of me to be responsible for my peace or my freedom. And now, how do I, this is a part of embodiment, how do I go about allowing that to become more and more of who I am, so that when I am at work and have a challenge, I navigate that with ease and grace? I tell you what, somebody who can navigate their everyday life with ease and grace, that means the Wi-Fi breaking down, going to the supermarket, having a conversation with a salesman, dealing with paying your taxes. The more ease and grace that you can interact with the human world is a statement of your level of consciousness. So there's no separation between the material world and the seemingly small things and accessing these higher states of your being.
Yeah, man. Like, and it's a process, you know? So like just getting started and just being open to the idea that maybe you can try some of this stuff and see how it resonates with you, and you know, be consistent enough that you can try something to the point that, okay, this really isn't for me, or I can see some of the benefits here. Like you were talking about, you saw something in the discipline of what you were doing during that time. And sometimes elements of discomfort, and again, we're conditioned to feel comfortable all the time, but putting ourselves through a little bit of discomfort, as long as it's not like really, you know, ripping us apart, can have ultimate payoff in the end. And now I couldn't imagine starting my day without meditation, you know, and that happened in a couple months of being trapped here in Panama.
Yeah. You know, it's so important to talk about that, because the discipline, let's put it like this, the discipline you learn through things, and I did ballet for 10 years. So that was my discipline training. And I think that helped me a lot in my life with just turning up and doing something repetitively. The discipline isn't because your enlightenment is in the discipline. It's because we have trained ourselves to be so uncomfortable with different emotions. This is the kind of crux of it. We've trained ourselves to be so uncomfortable with different states of being, which is why we numb ourselves. The discipline is training you to sit down and stop when the discomfort arises. The thing about discomfort is it's going to arise in your life anyway. If there are things that you haven't dealt with, life will give you an opportunity to deal with them. This was another part of the healing journey. You don't actually forever have to dig into yourself. Life will present you with opportunities to feel discomfort. That's going to happen. Most people are being presented with discomfort every single day without digging for it at all. And the discipline allows you to recognize when it comes and say, hey, I'm uncomfortable now with this emotion because I must be judging it and trying to get out of it. The discipline says, sit down and let's use some sort of process that works to actually feel this emotion fully and see if I can't become okay with the fact that it's here now. And then if you can do that, then that's part of the process and the embodiment experience. You know, I take people on a relatively long journey to explain all these things. But that's really what I believe the discipline can be used for. Sitting down when things get tough and knowing how to approach yourself in that moment with love and kindness and acceptance so that you can retrain yourself to be okay with how you're feeling. And that's the power of discipline, because so quickly we run away. And that's it. That if you applied discipline in that way to your life, then you could transform everything about what you do so fast, faster than you realize. Just 5 minutes of sitting in discomfort and letting yourself feel can change your life.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, to the other end of the spectrum, like, you know, I'm really big on productivity and organization and, you know, just setting a timer for 5 minutes when there's something you don't want to do and just telling yourself, like, I'm just going to do this for 5 minutes. And oftentimes just getting started gives you the motivation to carry on and do that thing that you didn't want to do. So, you know, just a little bit of discomfort or facing that thing that you're afraid of or that you don't want to do can give you the energy to carry on. And Absolutely. You realize it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And consistency helps you develop habits that then these things that were uncomfortable become automated, you know, and it's really exciting when you give that to yourself.
And in that way, like the way you're talking about it, discomfort eventually becomes your friend, because on the other side of discomfort, you have growth, you have acceptance, you have access to, you know, more of yourself, more of your creative abilities. So discomfort, so even talking about that, discomfort is a state of being that we have judged as not being okay. We don't want to feel it. But imagine if you changed your relationship or your idea about discomfort and said, I've just got another moment or an opportunity to sit with myself, to love and heal and accept this part of myself so that I can actually become more productive. I'm no longer afraid of discomfort. I'm no longer resistant of discomfort. So you're changing the relationship you have with that until you imagine that. Imagine if you weren't afraid of discomfort or fear, and that means you can just do things in life. You're not so hindered by stuff. And you're talking about getting started in projects. Most people don't get started because they can't even, they're so resistant of that feeling of discomfort. However, you know, there's many reasons why people don't start and there's many feelings, but imagine being like, discomfort, great. I've no problem. I feel you. You're not a problem. I'm going to move anyway. And that comes with sitting with it, you know,
it's amazing when you put yourself through discomfort enough, you start realizing that it's almost like a tingle of something that could be really exciting, you know, like we're all sitting in a very uncomfortable reality right now, but it's dislodging a lot of things for people that, you know, when we were just kind of like going through the motions of our old lives or old ways of thinking, you know, these old structures, that now we're realizing there's a lot of people are realizing that, you know, what they thought was comfortable, what was not, it was not what they want. And there's this sense of discomfort that's making us think differently. But it's a nice segue into talking about plant medicines and psychedelics, because this is one of the tools that you use to kind of, you know, help people with this awakening and enlightenment. So I'd really love if you could just give us a definition of this world really quickly, and maybe tell us some of the tools that you use within that, because there might be people watching that, you know, I mean, the automatic assumption is like, oh my God, that's illegal, or it's not good for you, or whatever. Yeah. So just tell us about it.
You know, I was out a couple of years ago picking mushrooms, and because we were going to hold a ceremony, and I was in the bush picking them, and technically it wasn't legal to serve mushrooms in the country I was in at the time. And I was thinking back to how many times I jumped out my window as a child, and how many times I skipped school, and how many times I broke the rules. And I thought, I've always been in training for this, you know. The psychedelic world, I'm going to give you just a second of my background with this, because psychedelics and drugs terrified me. You know, I had as much resistance to psychedelics and plant medicine as I did to meditation when I was younger. And I didn't touch them until I was in my later 20s. And it wasn't recreational. I never used these things recreationally. That's not to say there isn't a problem. There's no problem with how anyone does anything. It just wasn't my journey. And I never even considered that I wanted to work with psychedelics. But what happened, and this will probably segue into the description of them, is I had learnt so much spiritual philosophy. I had learnt so many spiritual concepts that made sense to me. And you know, these things I'm talking about now, like accessing oneness or being enlightened. But I knew that if I didn't feel it, if I didn't have spiritual experiences, then it was going to fall short. It was only ever going to be spiritual philosophy in my head. And I remember praying. I've prayed a lot in my life to the universe and been like, I need help to understand what these things that we're talking about in these textbooks feel like experientially. I wanted experience. And plant medicine turned up. It turned up really synchronistically in my life. And when it did turn up, there was this over resounding like feeling of excitement and yes to start working with these medicines. So the first medicine I worked with was ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is traditionally known as it. Well, sorry, I'm mumbling my words here. Ayahuasca comes from the Amazon, or the area in South America, down the Peru and Bolivia, kind of Amazon River, and into Brazil. That's its traditional home. And ayahuasca itself is one that I do work with. It is a teacher plant that you drink. You turn it into a brew. You drink it, and it takes you on a 6-hour journey. The science of it is really fascinating. I won't go into it in too much depth, but it has DMT in it. We make DMT naturally in our body, but we have an enzyme in our stomach that normally breaks it down. So we don't usually have a major effect of DMT in our system, except when we're dying or when we're giving birth, which is really interesting. The highest levels of DMT are shown to be released into the body through those two experiences. So ayahuasca has within it a enzyme, or a MAOI, which is a monooxide amine inhibitor. I'm just giving you some of the science, that blocks an enzyme in the stomach that inhibits the breakdown of the DMT during this experience. So the DMT can move into your system and takes people on a psychedelic journey for 6 hours. Interestingly, if you look at the brain under ayahuasca, it accesses the amygdala, which is the fear center, and the insula, which is the emotional center in the brain. So a lot of people can access past memories and trauma, which is fascinating to me, which means that people can actually process their trauma through an ayahuasca journey. And interestingly, because you're in a state of being that is a little different from your everyday 3D reality, you can then look at your traumas from different perspectives inside of your journey. And a lot of people go through catharsis in ayahuasca. So they cry, they shake, they do all the things that normally they wouldn't give themselves permission to. So I see ayahuasca as a visionary medicine, or a plant teacher, a tool that can help people gain insight into themselves and go through an inner healing process if they want to. It does so much more than that as well. The shamans in the jungle would say that it helps purge the body physically. It helps psycho-emotional problems. It can help people understand that they are bigger than their body and their mind, which is what we were talking about before, and realize that there's so much more. I've seen people access states of unconditional love in ayahuasca and come out feeling so peaceful, knowing that they're connected to the universe. A lot of people come out of things like ayahuasca and say, I realized that I was connected to everything, and I feel so safe. There is a safety in it. Everybody's experience is as different as every single person, so it's hard to give it to actually give it experiential descriptions, quite challenging, because everyone's description is hard. Everyone's experience is different. But what I would say for ayahuasca specifically, actually, you know what, for all the medicines, is that I believe they are just tools for you to access yourself, and that you communicate with yourself in ways through these journeys that maybe you wouldn't in your 3D reality, that give you more insight into yourself. So a lot of people say ayahuasca has a spirit outside of it, the ayahuasca spirit. I believe it's just you, and you're talking to yourself, and you're accessing higher levels of awareness so that you can gain clarity about your life. Does that make sense? Did I go off in too much of a tangent?
Yeah. No. It was really, really good and a really great description. And this is completely natural, right? It just comes from plants.
Yeah. So the ayahuasca. Yeah. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, I've not done ayahuasca myself yet. From being around so many people that have gone through these journeys, they kind of say, like, it calls to you when you're ready, and also the thing that people have said is, like, you need to make sure that when you do it, you go on a journey with someone that knows how to guide you on that. You kind of need like a guide to go through it, right? Because I've heard of some people going to ceremonies where the person guiding it is not great, and they don't have like great experiences with it. So if
sorry, go.
No, go ahead. I was like, just I guess what I'm asking for here is, like, what if people are interested in going on this journey, like, what should they be looking for or expecting?
Yeah, I personally believe having a guide is incredibly important. There's been some experiences, even with the training that I put myself through, that if I didn't have a guide, I don't know how I would have navigated that. But a guide to me is an incredible space holder, somebody who has done enough inner work on themselves that they're not afraid of any emotional state of being. They're not wobbled. They're not triggered really easily. They're not trying to be a big guru in your face. So a space holder, a good guide when it comes to psychedelics, in my opinion, is someone who can really just be there holding space for you and help you navigate your emotions and your psyche if you get stuck, but also knows the moment to step back and let you have your journey, and to step in and help when you get stuck. Without those things, it can be very disorientating, because we've spent so much of it not being okay with our emotional state of being, not knowing how to process trauma. If you don't have somebody to help guide you, especially in the after ceremony or the after days, then that can become, in some ways, more damaging than not. I've thought about this a lot, because a lot of the spiritual teachers that I love and I follow so deeply don't use psychedelics. They just don't use them. So when we look at the big teachers who are helping people liberate themselves, they never say to use psychedelics. And yet I've had a calling to work with them, even though I believe deeply in the process of awakening yourself. So I think understanding, one, that psychedelics are a tool. They're not a solution. They're not the answer to your enlightenment, but they are a gateway. And if you choose to work with them, you can have access to yourself and healing. But having a guide who can help you navigate the inner terrain of your emotions and your psyche is incredible, because it's very complex in there. It's very large. It's large. And if you don't have a solid level of understanding about the universe or who you are, you just make everything mean something that it doesn't. And you can get all twisted up in your experiences and all twisted up psychologically in what happened to you. Ayahuasca itself is not dangerous for the body. The people in the Amazon have been using this for thousands of years to help their. It's not dangerous for your body. It's incredible for your body, but it's like going to a psychology session, but you're working with the plants. So you just want support as you're going through that, because the psyche is somewhat fragile, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm a big advocate for a really, really good guide until you are at least at a position in which you have enough consciousness within inside of yourself to guide yourself. And even then, having good people around you that you can process with is usually very helpful.
So tell us about some of the other plant medicines that you've had experience with or that you work with,
Yeah.
and psychedelics as well, because they're not all necessarily plant-based, but they do come from nature.
Yeah, I can give whole talks on either one, on any of them. So the other one that I've worked with is Bufo alvarius, which is your 5-MeO DMT, which comes from the Sonoran desert toad. And the 5-MeO DMT is an incredibly interesting substance and journey. I don't think they've done a lot of studies on them because it's such a cathartic experience. I can't remember if you've seen my work, but it's very hard to hook somebody up to a brain scan whilst they go through this journey. So it's very challenging to see what actually happens in somebody's brain. But as far as I understand, the prefrontal cortex is basically turned off with the 5-MeO DMT, which means that the part of your brain that works in constructs basically goes to sleep, which could be thought of as the ego structure goes to sleep. And for a moment, you get access into the infinite nature of the universe. So you become one. Ayahuasca is more like visionary, so there's more you and other things still. It's still in the realm of the vast mind, whereas Bufo seems to give people this opportunity to touch the universe and to realize the non-dual reality of themselves. Thing I love about this medicine is it's like going home for a second. If you go deep enough, it's like, I remember who I am, but you always come back into your body. So what we want to do with something like Bufo is realize I'm infinite. I'm actually okay. There's no fear in the universe. Can I bring that back into my physical body and actually now embody it in being a human being? So that's a very powerful medicine. I work a lot with that when we talk about death, because I think the death process is a very similar experience to just experiencing oneness. So they're the bigger ones. Ayahuasca and Bufo are strong medicines. They're powerful medicines. They're the two that I work with. I love working with them, but I work with them at a very high level, and I do a lot of integration and preparation work now with people. And then we have many other medicines. We've got cacao, and we've got mescaline, which comes from like peyote, and we've got people working with Cambo. I don't work with Cambo personally, but that's a purgative medicine that a lot of people are working with. And then we have a whole realm of LSDs and of LSD and other synthetic DMTs. And so it gets very big in the world of psychedelics. I'll wrap
and mushrooms as well.
I forget about the mushrooms. Mushrooms is huge. Like many people. I don't work with mushrooms. I have my other part of my team works with mushrooms, but psilocybin is making a huge impact in the world right now. And again, not my area of absolute expertise, but I know a lot of people are working with microdosing with mushrooms and with also the mescaline or the cactus. And there's huge benefits in terms of helping people process emotionally. Overall, what I'm going to say about the psychedelics is that every single one of them is a permission slip to go back to what we were saying earlier, to feel what you're feeling. And as you look at your life from different perspectives on these psychedelics, they can help you to accept and see that it's okay to feel and express what you're feeling. That's really what I believe is the core of the work of all the plants. They're helping you to see yourself in multiple perspectives, feel different emotions, realize that it's okay to feel those things, realize it's okay to express those things, thus bringing you to a point of more acceptance of the human experience.
We were talking a little bit yesterday, like it's kind of crazy because there's a lot of misunderstanding about these natural nature-given substances, and like we're being told by governments that we are not allowed to consume plants, but we are allowed to consume, pharmaceutical drugs and things that are getting people like really hooked and addicted that are not natural substances or even alcohols. So, tell us a little bit about the misunderstanding about these nature given tools, and what can we tell people that are afraid or resistant to them?
Yeah, I mean, that's the craziness of it, isn't it? If you took all of the medical related problems associated with the pharmaceutical industry, if you looked how many deaths there were, how many problems in the body, how many challenges in the psyche that have erupted from using pharmaceuticals in the West, and you took every single negative response of a psychedelic probably ever, it wouldn't even be a fraction of what we consider to be normal in a westernized society of medicating people to their eyeballs, which is just mind-boggling to me. The natural substances, they don't have physiological repercussions. I think most of the studies say that almost all the plants are completely safe. The lethal dose of mushrooms, for instance, I think is like 7 kilos, which means you'd have to eat 7 kilos of psychedelic mushrooms before you would have a 50% chance of maybe potentially dying. So the amount that my shaman, one of my favorite people in the universe, drank a liter of ayahuasca in a night because it was part of her insane training. And normally you're drinking like 20 to 30 mils of it, and was completely fine. And yet if you drop a packet of prescription pills, you could go into cardiac arrest. Alcohol, for instance, there's been more alcohol-related deaths and problems with brain disease and, challenges with the body because of alcohol than there has been of plant medicines. So we could look at that in a number of ways. I mean, the easiest way for me to digest that, which just makes sense, is that it's much more beneficial to people at the top who make the rules to have a numbed out, dumbed down society who's living in fear, who will buy products and do what they're told because they're terrified, and will buy alcohol and cigarettes and things that are terrible for them because they're trying to numb out, and they will fuel the society, like the whole economy based on fear and numbing out, rather than have people wake up and liberate themselves, because an awakened society will not listen to the rules. They will question everything. And plant medicines give people the opportunity to wake up and to realize they're free, to realize they don't need to be told what to do, to realize they're sovereign beings, to realize that they don't need all of the things that maybe they were buying when they're trying to numb themselves out. So I've always thought, well, of course they're going to make the most powerful tools in the world that help people to awaken illegal, because awakened human beings they're uncontrollable. Nobody can tell them what to do. You don't know what they're going to do next. You can't, the whole marketing industry of our entire world is based on the fact that we know what a human being will do when they're in a state of fear or lack. When you get a human being who's in a state of a wholeness and completion and love, oh my God, watch out. You don't know what they're going to do.
Right.
So, I mean, it was very easy when I started looking at those things to be like, of course we've set society up this way. As we're going through more and more of a revolution of where we're starting to make more of an impact because more people are putting their foot down, and we can't continue living on planet Earth if we keep, denying people the ability to wake themselves up, although they'll find a way. Like for instance, the American soldiers with the Vietnamese War were taking LSD. I love this story. It highlights it so perfectly. LSD wasn't illegal, so they were taking LSD, and the soldiers, through a process of taking LSD, didn't want to fight anymore. So they had to make LSD legal so that people could numb back out and actually fight. So what would happen to our military system if people started taking more of these substances and realizing that they were one with the universe, and that the people that they're having to kill are actually just an extension of who they are? And it makes no sense to destroy communities and children and livelihoods of others based on needing resources that if we rip them out of the earth anyway, we're destroying the body that we're connected to. The whole military system would break down. Business would have to change. Our supermarkets would change. Everything would change. And people living in the old world are too afraid of change because we're so busy wanting to be in a place of security and what's known. So this is kind of my take on the plants and on the pharmaceutical industry. And I think anybody who is interested in, waking up or even working with psychedelics, it doesn't take much to step back and to have a look at it from a different perspective, to realize that we've been deeply conditioned to believe that what is actually not safe for us is safe, and what is safe and empowering for us, they've made illegal, and they've kind of tried to push it out. People are in jail right now for trimming marijuana, which is one of the most medicinal plants in the in the whole world, which is easy to me. But this is the world that we came into. Welcome to planet Earth, where everything exists.
So like from a personal level with alcohol, I talked about like I stopped drinking alcohol a year and a half ago, and 86% of the American adult population drink alcohol.
Mm.
And when it's one of the most addictive substances on the planet, and we are given constant media messages that we need alcohol in our lives. We need it to celebrate. We need it when we've had a bad day. We need it to connect with our friends. We need it to, celebrate any sort of milestone. It is a part of our lives and ingrained in our lives, so much so that 86% of the adult population drink it. However, the organizations that also tell us how to regulate ourselves with this substance are the very people that make it. So the people that make alcohol are the ones that are telling us that we should be able to moderate. It is our fault if we have a problem with this addictive, numbing substance, right? And for me, it was like, holy shit, like this is crazy. And, even when you tell people that, like, yeah, I've stopped drinking, they're like, oh, you must have had a problem with it. I'm like, tell me a person that drinks alcohol. It's like telling a fly into that Venus flytrap, and you should be able to get out of it. It's your
Yeah.
own fault if you can't, So it's kind of crazy because you're absolutely right. It does serve them to keep us numbed, and we are less likely to take action or take care of ourselves or get ourselves out of our rut or start asking bigger questions when we're in this constant state of like hangover and numbness, like how many days did I like lay in bed thinking I want to die right now instead of like, okay, how am I going to change the world today?
I mean, here's the thing that I love so much. Like, firstly, what a brilliant fucking design to keep us asleep. What a brilliant design. How Look how wonderfully that we created a system to keep ourselves asleep, which means that we're going to get to experience duality. If we came to planet Earth and we just remembered who we were from the very beginning, it's like going to the theme park and getting the prize before you played the game. We wanted to come here on a very spiritual level. I'm going to speak metaphysical for a second. We wanted to come here to fall asleep so that we could have the experience of the opposite. We wanted to know what it felt like to be suppressed, to be shut down, to be made feel, to be less than, so that when we're ready to give it up, we can feel what it feels like to wake up, to be free, to forgive, that's the liberating experience of being a human being. You get to feel those things when you give up the opposite. So we have this amazing design that we created to keep ourselves asleep. So brilliant. But the thing that I love so much about the universe is that no matter how hard a society or a system, whoever you want to make responsible for it, them, us, we did this together. No matter how hard you try and keep a society asleep, the further you go into your sleepiness, the more painful it will become, the more numbed out you will become, the more disconnected you will come, which can become the exact catalyst for wanting to wake up and enlighten yourself. So whilst we look at this and we're like, oh, the systems are so terrible and the people in power have created a way to numb everybody out, shut everybody down, and have the whole of society beating each other up and keeping them in check for staying asleep. Like your friends are now saying, oh, if you don't drink, something's wrong with you. You should drink and numb yourself out again. The very system that is seemingly causing the shutdown is the exact same system that's going to force people to liberate themselves. It's brilliant. So from a spiritual perspective, I think everything's on track and we're doing a damn good job at waking ourselves up through a process of metamorphosis, and we had to shut down first. So I always think from these two perspectives of like, yes, we created it like that, but yes, there's a bigger reason for why this is happening. With alcohol, just to share with you what happened with me, I came from the same kind of societal background. My family didn't drink actually, but I drank a lot when I was younger because my friends did. And my journey with alcohol, especially working with meditation and psychedelics and wanting to discover deeper and deeper states of myself, is I would start to feel when I went into certain, especially bufo journeys, how damaging alcohol was to my body. I could actually feel it. Not like I just know it and I feel like shit with a hangover. Like there was experiences I had where I could feel every cell in my body was like, it felt like it was poisoning itself. And the more that I went on the journey of self-love, and the more I loved myself, the less I wanted to do anything that would harm me. So it was very personal. And it just got to a point where one day it's like, I actually physically can't put a poison in my body with the amount of awareness that I have about the pain that it's causing myself. It was like a complete, it just didn't work anymore. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, I don't drink. I drink alcohol when I feel happy. I only drink alcohol as a celebration. But what my understanding and what I see is that the more you actually become in tune with your body, the more you actually let yourself feel. We've talked a lot about feeling. The more doing anything that's damaging to your body feels terrible. It feels terrible to the point now where the idea of alcohol is like, it would be like beating myself up over my head or like stabbing myself. I wouldn't do it anymore. So it's not like, I would never tell somebody not to drink, but I do think that as you evolve on your spiritual journey and start to allow yourself to like land back in your body and accept how you feel, that you will just give up things that no longer serve you. So if 87% of the American population is still drinking, I would say it's time for a love revolution, and it's time to have a look at how we can help people love themselves again. Because this is a statement of people not feeling comfortable, not feeling whole, not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy. This is time for the biggest love revolution we've ever seen. And if we're this, ready, I think we're ready for it. And this is how we will transform the world.
Yeah, man. Yes. I'm so like, so we've covered so much in this time, and I really am thankful that you were willing to give us a couple minutes of your gifts of guided meditation, just to, kind of get us into this headspace and give us a taste. So you've offered to do this right now. We're only going to do 5 minutes. So those of you that like maybe are feeling a little resistant to it, it's only going to be 5 minutes, and it's absolutely beautiful. And Holly has agreed to take us on a little journey for a couple minutes. So are you cool to do that now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such a beautiful sum up to everything else we've been talking about.
Cool. So I am actually going to take myself off the screen while we do this, because I'm going to join in. And so we can have all focus on you for 5 minutes, and then I'll come back on and we'll have the last little wrap up and questions. So I'm going to hand it over to you now, Holly, to take us on a journey.
So let's use this moment to actually have an experience, because we came here to have experiences. Without experiences, we don't get to discover and realize who and what we are. So this is an opportunity to actually have an experience, which is what we came here for. So let's just start by bringing our attention to our breath. We're always breathing every single day. So let's just bring our focus to the fact that this is happening. And as you breathe in, just start to notice that your whole body is breathing in. And as you begin to breathe out, just become aware of the fact that your entire body is breathing out, and bringing your attention just back to this moment now. You breathe in, you're aware that your body is breathing in. And you breathe out, aware that your body is breathing out. You can sigh out if you wish. Let's just do one more. So this time, a nice deep breath in, and just letting go in whatever way you want. You can sigh it out, you can make a sound, you can And now just for a minute, I'm going to take you on a small guided process. And I want you to see in your mind's eye in front of you that there is a door in front of you. On the other side of this door is the great unknown. You have no idea what's on the other side of this door. You can't. But in order to go through this door, something very specific needs to be left behind. You can't go through this door unless your ideas of who and what you are, of what the universe is left behind. So as you approach the door, I want you to notice that there is a small rack down next to the door, like a shoe rack. You could put your shoes on it. But this is a very particular type of rack in which you just want to drop your mind off for a second. Now, you might say, how do I drop my mind off? My mind's going all the time. This is incredibly challenging. But just for a couple of minutes, I want to let you know that it's not challenging at all. Just for a few minutes, can you just forget about everything you've ever been told about who you are? Forget about what school said about who you are and what the world is. Forget about all history lessons and geography, and forget about math and English and algebra that's translated into taxation and all of these other things we deal with. So just forget about it for a couple of minutes. How about you forget about what your friends and family have told you about who you are and what the world is? In fact, just for a minute, let's forget about what we've told ourselves about who and what life is. We're just going to empty ourselves completely. And don't worry, you can come back out and you can pick up whatever you want, but just for a couple of minutes, let's let go of what we think we know. Because to move through this door in front of us, we have to leave behind our ideas of certainty about anything. Notice if that makes you feel uncomfortable, and know that that's entirely okay. Just let yourself feel it. Discomfort, as we were talking about earlier, and any other emotion is just an experience happening in your body, and your body's designed to feel it. It's okay. So just letting go, emptying, emptying, emptying. Feeling that it's actually incredibly easy. Now put your hand on this door, on the knob, turn it and walk through. You realize on the other side of this door that there is space. There's nothing here. There's no thing. There's no walls. There's nowhere where this space starts and ends. Just start to feel this space and notice as you start to feel it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And bigger and bigger. And if you were to try and find a beginning and ending to it, notice that you can't. Every time you find a beginning and ending, it can just keep going on beyond that. So just let this space go and go and go and go. Now that you're here, you may notice that your mind says, well, now that I'm here, now what? What's this all about? But what if there was no now what, just for a minute? What if just for a minute I wanted to meet you, just as you are? Not some idea about your past or some achievement or some philosophical story that you can tell. It doesn't matter. What about for just a minute, just you bare naked in this moment without anything but just this moment? And now that you're in this space, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about this space so that you can see that you are experientially feeling a shift. Firstly, notice that you're here, that you exist. Even though you've dropped everything off, you haven't ceased to exist. You're still here. Also now notice that the space itself that is everywhere isn't a particular gender or a particular age. Notice that it has no preference, that it's not a particular religion. And just start to allow yourself to sink into the experience of this neutral, infinite space. Feel all around this space and notice that there is nowhere that it's incomplete. It's not broken. It doesn't need to undergo any type of healing to be whole. It doesn't need to figure anything out to be itself. Now notice that this space doesn't mind what emotions arise inside your body. It never judges emotion. It doesn't make one emotion good or bad. Notice that this space doesn't need to forgive you for anything because it's never judging you. There's no judgment. It's not writing down everything you've done in your past so that when you die, You go to this gate and someone there says, oh, I've looked at all the things that you've done in your life, and based on all the bad stuff you've done, you're going to go to the bad place or hell. It doesn't do this. Notice that this space doesn't need anything in return for just being itself. And just for a minute, start to feel that there's no separation between who you are and this space. Realize that this space is moving in and out of you, and it's infinite. And whatever you think you are, maybe you're a little bit bigger than that. Start to feel that this space doesn't run out of itself. So if you give and give and give the space, it doesn't run out. Notice that this space is unconditional. It doesn't place conditions on others. It doesn't retaliate. It doesn't withdraw itself if it doesn't get what it wants. And just sink a little bit deeper into the feeling of this space that is a real feeling that you are accessing in this moment. Notice that this space exists everywhere. And if you go back and pick up your mind, the space doesn't actually disappear. It's still here. And just for the last couple of moments of this meditation, stay in this space, but bring your attention to your heart, inside of your body right now. And start to breathe in the peacefulness of this space. Start to breathe it into your heart, allowing your heart to relax. And each time you take a breath in, allow your heart to start to smile. Place a smile inside of your heart as you keep breathing in the peacefulness of this eternal space. As far as you could understand peace, would you say this space is peaceful? Would you say that it's infinite, unconditional, limitless, indestructible? And now within this space, notice that you can begin to smile as well. This is the unconditional space of your heart, of your inner being, the quantum field. Heaven exists in this space. Unconditional love comes from this space, and it's not separate from who you are. Notice that it does not matter who and what you decide to be within this space. You are equally as loved, equally as safe, always seen, always known. No matter what you do, you can't get it wrong. When you identify with this space, you understand how the universe sees you, how the universe sees everybody. Unconditional, infinite. And the further you sink into this and allow this to become more of your identification rather than just the mind all the time, the more peaceful you can become. And just so we don't demonize the mind, notice that the space has no problem with whatever's in the mind. The mind is welcome within this space. As we begin to identify more with the space, which could also be called our soul, our heart, heaven, then everything in our life becomes easier and easier and easier. When we identify with the mind alone, it can be a little challenging, but don't worry, you can always put it down and come back to your heart whenever you wish. I hope this has been helpful in giving you one access point to a state of being that is very relaxed, very loving, and completely unconditional that you have access to at all times.
Wow. I'm just kind of like moving back and forth. I know you can't see me right now, but I'm very chill. That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Holly.
You're most welcome. I mean, the whole point of this is to actually get to feel an energetic shift in your state of being. You can feel, like I can feel for you and for whoever will be listening, that everybody's relaxing, right? There's a peacefulness that's coming in right now. And so everything that we've been talking about is just how do we access this state of peacefulness? And the more that you identify with this state of peacefulness, the more you can just allow all the experiences of life to happen.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I kind of feel very fuzzy. Like my eyes are kind of like almost softer and my whole body just kind of feels more chilled and more relaxed. And it feels amazing, but at the same time, it's also a different sensation, particularly like in the middle of the day, So I think it's so incredible to just take 5 minutes and see how you can just completely change the state you are in, right?
Yeah, that's part of the process of realizing that you really are in control of your state of being. And we get so wound up in our head, and our head often thinks so many, mean things that we are often in a state of stress and anxiety. But if we can access peace, this is a dimension of peace, right? You can actually begin to function living in a state of peace. It doesn't actually destroy your productivity. It doesn't destroy your ability to access creativity or function as a normal human being. In many ways, it helps you function more clearly, more in alignment with who and what you are. So doing this practice and allowing yourself to move out of a state of, constant stress and worry into this dimension of actually infinite peace or relaxation can help you immensely with your daily human activities.
100%. And for those of you watching or those that you will be watching on the replay, if you felt some resistance to that or we blindsided you with it, you can come back to it. You can try, you can try it again. Like Holly just gave us that gift and we have that. And obviously, like, she's hugely inspiring and working on some amazing stuff to help people, become enlightened. So you can go to earthpulsecollective.com or follow Holly on Instagram or Earth Pulse Collective and find out more and go on this journey. And I highly encourage you to, because it's an incredible one. And Holly is, an incredible person to go on that journey with. And I love the fact that, there's not many women that lead these kinds of journeys, particularly the plant medicine and like psychedelic aspects of it. And the fact that that is also one of the tools you have in your toolkit. And being a woman in this kind of field is fairly rare to be like a female shaman, and I think that's something about you that made me a little bit more open to the ideas of these things that I've not yet done myself. I'm still getting there. I was terrified of cacao, which is like, it's kind of like hot chocolate that makes your heart feel nice and warm and fuzzy, but it doesn't do anything crazy. It's just this like overall warm body feeling. And I was like terrified of that, so like slowly easing into this idea of it's ultimately for me, it's control, right? And I know that's my biggest barrier to a lot of this stuff is like I have a very big problem letting go of control.
Well, here, let me play with you for 2 seconds, because I'm sure that many people identify with that. If you just go straight back into that space, just go into that for a minute. Does the space need to control anything?
No, man.
And the other question is, does the space have a big problem with control?
No, it's definitely my head.
So, but we don't want to make control a problem. But what you can see here is when you identify with the one who has control and is scared, you have that experience, right?
Yeah.
If you identify more with this space of, that part of you, there's a part of you that you are legitimately experiencing right now that doesn't have a problem with control. Mm-hmm. So you see that right now we have this beautiful duality in which you actually are both. There is a part of you that has a problem with control, and there is a bigger part of you that doesn't have a problem with control.
Mm.
The way that we actually start to shift out of being the one who has a problem with control is to become into that space and let the one who needs to have control be welcomed into it.
Mm.
See that it's totally fine to have the inner child part of yourself be the one who needs to have control. Let them play it out in the space. Say, go ahead and have as much control as you want and play that out. But you know that you're not the only part that needs to have control. So I'm going to put it like this because I want it to really help. Imagine that you're in a Ferrari and the part of you that feels like it needs control has been driving your Ferrari. Mm-hmm. Now just switch them around. Put the part of you that's needed control in the passenger seat and let them do whatever they want to do. It's like you're a little child. You can have control, illusory control, feel how you want to feel. I mean, control is really just masking a deeper fear. So they're just afraid of being out of control, right? So let them feel that. But you get back in the driver's seat, which means that you know that you are also the infinite space that doesn't need control because you're already safe. And then let the other part exist too. And eventually the part that needed control, if it feels safe enough within inside of your body, it will just give up eventually. It would just say, oh, I don't need to do this anymore. I'm safe in here. Now I can go and play in the sandpit and make a castle.
Yeah, it's crazy, you know, when you start to identify these, like where so many behaviors, actually the root of that and realizing is, it comes mostly down to control for me. And had I not gone through this process or this journey of starting to peel back the layers and play around with meditation and play around with removing substances and play around with overcoming these limiting beliefs that I have, a lot of it comes down to this idea of control, which actually for me was a really calming experience. It's like, okay, now I know the thing that I can start working with and the thing that I can try to start letting go of. So I think that's a beautiful segue into my final question for you, which, and I can't wait to hear what your answer is, but what does living unrestricted mean to you?
For me, it means living in the space. You're living identified with that space, which for me is infinite. It's unbounded. It's unrestricted. So another way I could say that is not living by the rules of anybody else's thoughts, not even living by my own thoughts. And living unbounded means to be in the complete and utter understanding that I am connected with the unboundless universe. And that translates into my everyday life. It means that I follow my heart. It means that I know that nothing's really wrong with the choices that I make. It means that I say yes to the things I want to say yes to, and I say no to the things I don't want to say yes to. And it means, that's the practical application of it. But it just means being in a state of total creativity and love for myself all the time.
I love that so much. It's beautiful. Holly, you are epic. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom and giving us some really great definitions of things that might be scary or unknown for people. And I'm so excited to see where you take this project. So if you want to discover more about Holly's offer, check her out and her collective on Instagram at Earth Pulse Collective, or you could go to earthpulsecollective.com because there's some really big things coming down the track from these guys that are just going to set the world on fire. So thank you again.
You're so welcome. We're launching our first program this week, which we are going to be taking people through a process to train them to be able to not only wake up and be free themselves, but to actually become facilitators of this work for other people too. So we're super excited about launching the program. So if you're interested in walking that journey or knowing anything more, earthpulsecollective.com is where we're at right now. And we're super excited. Thank you so much for having us. And we're having so much fun being the rebels and the misfits of both the spiritual and personal development world and running around and living life on our terms, right?
Yeah, man. I love it. Thank you so much, Holly. I'm going to put you on one side while I introduce our guest for next week. So thank you again. So guys, wow, I hope you're feeling nice and relaxed and inspired and, interested in looking at how you can become more enlightened in your life. And next week we have another equally amazing woman. They're all amazing in their own right and just all going on different paths. So my guest next week is Tarath Al-Saraf. She's based in the UK and she is the operations manager for EIT Health. And she's an incredibly fascinating woman, being a child of conflict and then moving to the UK as an immigrant and, going down that normal path of chasing success and thinking that was the key to kind of freedom and realizing that it was not. So she lives within, a normal structure of the world while going on a journey of personal development within that. And her ideas around femininity and sisterhood and philosophy and just life are really inspiring. I think a lot of us are in situations maybe where we can't run away to the circus or we can't go on a journey. So hearing stories of people that are going on that personal journey while they're still, living what we would deem normal lives or having normal careers. So I hope you'll join me next Sunday, same time, to meet Tarath. If you liked this episode today, please go ahead and click the like down below and leave us a comment about what you think. And if you'd like more episodes of Unrestricted, do please hit subscribe. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I will see you next week on Unrestricted Live. Thank you.